Here we are with a Material UI table, and it's built with version 5 of Material UI, or perhaps known better as MUI now. And we have some pretty basic styling on here using the theme and the palette in the theme. I've added a couple of I've added a link column, a button column, and we've got TypeScript going on behind the scenes. If you're interested to see how I created this table, then stick around. Here we are with pretty much the blank slate for today's demo, and we saw the final result in the intro just a moment ago, and all that I have set up is this is an app created using Create React App, and I have gone ahead and done the imports for the variety of table components and subcomponents, the button and the link that I'm going to use, and then I've also got this import called Faker. And so what that is it comes from a third-party library called Faker.js, nothing related to Material UI, and it's just a way to generate fake data. It's got a pretty nice API, and you can see how it works here. So today you can see this is a TSX file, and what we're going to do is first I'll add typing to this data, just it's good practice to do that, and then second we've got our return statement down here for this tutorial table, and I'm going to build the table. So first things first, we need to create our interface for this data. So I'm going to call the items within it address. And so interestingly, each of the items in it is actually coming from Faker as a string. There's no number values or anything like that. And I'm just going to flush these out here. So now really just jumping right into things, we've got this interface address, we've got our array of addresses, and we've got this for loop that's pushing into this addresses array, and it's pulling a bunch of Faker data. Each time you call one of these, you're going to get a new value of fake data. But we haven't told this array that it is of type address yet. So let's do that, and really we're telling this const that it is an array, first of all, and that it is an array of addresses. So there we go. So now our data is nicely typed, so that'll protect us from bugs in the future when using that data. And one comment I'll make is, as you're using Material UI with TypeScript, you really don't actually, your JSX is not impacted very much by using TypeScript. It's really values like this, the data that you're pulling in, any helper functions or event handlers. In a little bit, we will also, I'll add an SX value, a styling value using the SX prop. And so I will pull that out here as its own const, just to show you what the TypeScript typing looks like. And I'll just call it TableContainer SX. For now, I'll just say that equals an object. And so we'll use that in a little bit. But really, the core of this tutorial is about the table itself. So as we see from this import statement up here, all of this coming from MUI, an MUI table is not simply just one component. It's really quite a few components within table, and then there's even the table container, which is usually wrapping the table, or perhaps even always, or almost always wrapping the table. So anyway, let's get coding this. So first, I'm going to have that table container, and I'm going to set the interior component to paper. So the purpose for that is just that it gives us some nice styling, some kind of nice default styling, and eventually I'll bring in the SX prop, and I'll point it at that table container. But we'll do that in a little bit. In fact, let's see if it'll let me just go ahead and add this const value. Oh, here we are. Gotta have nice camel casing. Go ahead and see if it'll let us just take that in there. It might complain about it because it's we need TypeScript. So anyway, there we go. So now we have a table container. Let's just go ahead and see, make sure we're rendering fine. There it was from the intro. You saw it briefly there. So let's see. There's nothing to see yet, so that makes sense. But we do not appear to have any errors down here other than ESLint telling us that we're maybe doing some bad things with all these imports that are not being used. All right, so let's actually get into the meat of it. Add a table component here. And in a little bit, I'll set a sticky head on that. But for now, let's just keep on going with our components. So we've got basically our wrappers now. Let's add our table head. And in a minute, we'll look at the DOM and just dig into this a little bit. I think it's almost easiest if we just get our opening and closing tags in here. So I'll do that. Within our table head, we're going to have a table row. And within our table row, let's see, we have 5 data points up here, but I'm actually going to combine these and give them a little bit of positioning, vertical positioning using a stack component, but we'll get to that in a minute. First, we just need to get our table cells in there. So with these table cells, let's step back a minute. We've got our table head, so that's going to be the top blue row that we saw, our header row, of course. And whether we're talking about a table head or a table body, probably you're going to have table row in there wrapping the table cells. So that's an important point. So VS Code is helping me quite nicely here. The TableCell renders as a TH when it's inside of the table head up here, and it renders as a TD if it's within a table body. So we'll see that in a little bit as we look at the DOM. But until then, let's get our titles in here. So we are only going to have the 4, like I mentioned. And let's see, let's actually see if our auto formatter will format this a little bit for us. There we go. Got a little ahead of myself there. We could add a scope on here, like this. I'll do it at least for one. These are nice for screen readers, but not necessary here. So that's really all we got to do to have a table head in there. And let's see if that's going to go ahead and render for us. Yeah, there we go. It's up here at the top. I don't have any of the nice positioning or margin or anything like that I had in the demo, or in the intro here. So let's go ahead and finish out our JSX, at least the beginning versions of it, and then we'll go back and add some styling just to get our table in a nicer spot, and then we'll keep going with maybe some of the props that we'll explore. So next up, we've got our table head done. Next up, let's get our table body in there. In our table body, once again, table row, just like we saw on the table header. Now let's get these table cells in here for our body. And let's go ahead, and here's what I'll do with this. Let's get like, you know what? Let's just get some of these table cells in here, and we'll go ahead and cause it to render as many times as there are rows of data in our array. So I've got the array getting 20 rows of fake data from Faker, so we should be able to use that addresses array and map all across. This is very typical syntax you'll see a lot. Yeah, let's leave that there for a moment. So I gotta get the syntax just right here. Alright, that looks pretty good. Now let's take this JSX that we got, put it in there, and then I'll have to see if I've got any typos or anything like that. Let's see. Yeah. make sure you close all of your parentheses and curly braces, but I think that's good. Okay, simple as that, I think. We're going to get 20 of these rows in here, and let's go ahead and add a key. And then, more importantly, we'll see, let's just start out with the street address and the, let's see, I'll just start with the street address in there so that it's not too ugly. We've also got to add in the secondary address, which is like apartment number or something like that, into that table cell, but I'll do that in a minute. So next up is our address zip code. Address.city. And address.state. So let's give that a run. All right. We've got very rudimentary table in here. You can see the table header up here looks the exact same as the rows in the table body, and it scrolls away. So let's keep at this table body, and let's expand our, let's get all the data that we wanted in there for this first table cell. So that's going to be our street address and our secondary address I mentioned. We're going to combine these into one, stack them vertically. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use the stack component. And I'm going to set the direction to column. And put a couple divs in here. So the stack component is new to MUI 5. If you have a one-dimensional layout, whether vertical or horizontal, it's just a quick column, a quick component for doing that. And it reminds me a lot of the box component, so I'm not sure if it's exactly supposed to be a replacement, but perhaps. So anyway, let's get a div in there. Oh, thanks, VS Code. And put that address in there. Okay, it's got to think about whether I suck at coding or not. Oh, it decided I'm not too bad. So we've got the street address, and what's the other one? Street secondary, I want to say. Yeah, secondary address. All right. So let's take a look at that. Oh, there we go. I don't know if you caught that, but they were lined up next to each other, and now they're vertical. So that's pretty cool already. One thing I want to actually, two things I want to do. I want to change this zip code from being just the text to actually being a link. And I want to change the state from being just the text to a button. But you know what? I'm actually tired of looking at this ugly table. So let's go in and flesh out this TableContainer SX here. So what we want to do there, first we're going to give it its typing. So anytime that you're using TypeScript with SX props, well, quite simply, the typing just goes like this. That's all there is. So you can see that I imported that up here from MUI material. So next up, let's start with some simple things. First thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to set a width of max content. So this is a really handy value if you've never run into it before. It will look at the contents of a div or whatever container, and this is an HTML world, not Material UI world, so whatever the wrapper is, it'll look at the contents of the children inside of it and only set the width to dynamically to whatever it needs to be to contain that those child contents, and it won't add any extra width. So I've got that in place. Let's go ahead and set a max height. The reason I'm going to do that is because I'm going to add a sticky header, and we got to have height. We got to have the outside wrapper shorter than or smaller than the inside contents in order to have a scroll bar. And if we don't have a scroll bar, we don't have any sticky header. So anyway, or at least we wouldn't see it. So got that in place. Let's add a quick border, just because I like them. And I'm going to set it to a gray color and give it some opacity so that it doesn't look too obvious or too solid. So I like to have my stuff centered. I'm going to add a margin left, margin right. Let's see if TypeScript catches that typo that I've got there. We'll see. I think that's what it's saying down here. Can't tell for sure. See if it likes it better if I delete that. Yeah, there it goes. There you go. TypeScript in action right there. Now, margin top, I'm going to set that to 4. One thing I want to call out, initially I actually set it to 100. You know what? I'm going to show you what happens when we do that in MUI version 5. Okay, we're seeing some progress here. I think it's got my margin of 4 up there. So that's not 4 pixels. It's actually probably like 32 pixels or something. So notice how I set it to 100 and it's just gone. It's not gone, it's way down here. That is not 100 pixels. That is 100 from the MUI styling system, and who knows how many pixels that was. But like I said, I think 4 is maybe 32 pixels or so. So just be aware of that. It took me a couple of minutes when I was working on this earlier to figure out where the heck my table had gone. Border radius 2, and I think that's all the styling I'm going to do at the container level. But now we've actually got it centered. In my opinion, the scroll bars are kind of ugly. I actually I'll put a link in the show details. This is a good time to mention everything. There will be a link to all of this code that I'm working on in the video details. I'll also include a link. It's a little bit tricky with MUI adding WebKit, but you'll need some WebKit styling to style the scroll bar. And silly me, I guess, I've actually written 8 other table customization articles about MUI, from a sticky column, not a sticky header, but a sticky column, a hack for that, sizing the cells and table width, doing all kinds of styling on it, the pagination component. I've really hit the MUI table pretty thoroughly, and I've got a couple of videos on it as well in YouTube if you prefer. Of course, if you're watching this video, maybe you prefer video. So anyway, I will put links to some of that in the show note, in the video details, the show notes as I like to call it. Been listening to too many podcasts, I guess. And anyway, so I have a ton more there that you're welcome to check out. Also, I'll put a link to a really solid MUI course on Udemy, and I've actually been in contact with the creator. I did not create it, but you can take that. It's over 40 hours of content. It's super well rated. It's gotten a whole lot of students who've enjoyed it. So definitely worth checking that video out, or that video series, that course out on Udemy. So all that's in the video details. So back to this. Let's see, we've got our SX props in there. Let me think about what we want to do next. While we're at it, I'll go ahead and set the sticky header on here. Alright, simple as that. Let's see if it's effective. Yeah, there we go. See how that's sticking now? And let's actually look at the DOM briefly, now that we've got all of this put together. So I'll note that an interesting thing is the sticky header is actually, I must have clicked on just the right thing. The sticky header is actually being applied to the THs that we see here. I assumed it was going to be applied to the TR or the TH, the T-head, but no, it's actually on these TH elements here. So we can see position sticky. That's how that sticky header is accomplished. So we accomplished it in my case through this prop, but that's ultimately just translating to sticky position. You could have just added it yourself if you wanted to. You could have even done it here with a nested component, a nested selector in our props up here, in our SX prop, TableContainer SX value. Anyway, so just an interesting call out, and let's look at the DOM just to see the structure in action. So I like to talk about in MUI, we live in MUI world, which is components, or we are living in HTML world, which is how the components are actually rendered here in our web page. So in MUI world, we would have, this would be equivalent to the table container. This is the table, TableHead, TableRow, and then these are the table cells that are within the TableHead. But you can see they're, of course, being rendered as div for the table container, and then a table, and then a T-head, a TR, and TH. So it's important to keep that distinction in your mind. MUI has essentially abstracted us away from the DOM, so we're not dealing with the DOM directly. So anyway, TBody, pretty much the same thing, except instead of rendering as TH, it's rendering as TD for the cells here. So this one, just a good call out, it's got our div, which is the stack component, and then the two divs that we added in that are these two divs right here. So pretty cool that we're able to see all that in the DOM. So next up, I'm going to add just a little bit more styling to the table body, and then after that, I think we will move on to the link and the button components that we're going to inject into the table. So let's see. Got our SX prop here, and I'm just going to work right in the JSX here. I'm not going to pull it out into a const or anything like that. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to style every other every other row with a gray background color, some kind of background color. I'm planning on gray. And I'll talk about this here in a moment. So this is our selector. It's saying at the table body level in the DOM, look for any, we've got the space here, so it's saying look for any children, TRs, and then style nth of type, and then we have to give it an equation, essentially an equation. If I want to say style every other, then that would be 2n. If I want to say style every other, starting with the first, 2n plus 1. So then it's like 1, 3, 5. So kind of going back to your high school algebra or something with that in notation there. Anyway, so we've got that. Actually need to add in our color. And this might look a little bit odd, and I guess it kind of is in CSS world. This gray 100 value is actually from the MUI theme. So if you ever look at the theme palette, you're probably used to primary and secondary. There's also literally gray, that's a sibling of primary. So within primary, you might have main, I forget what other values. Within gray, we have a bunch of grayscale values, 100, 200, 300, and so on. So I pulled one of those values. So it might be, hopefully it's easy to see in the video with my screen capture, but I've got these every other rows being styled here. All right, I think on to the last thing. Let's see. Yeah, let's get the links in there. So we've got our zip code. Let's turn that into a link. And go ahead and have this zip code be our text for our link. Important things with our link, we need the href. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just go to Google, and let's say just putting in a zip code here. So I'm going to take that search value up here and pop that back over here. And I'm going to use some string interpolation, which means we'll need curly braces here. And I'm going to add address.zipcode here. Got my tick in the wrong spot. Okay, let's give that a minute. So what I've done here is I just took this URL from Google, I just searched a random zip, took that URL, plopped it here into my href. So we should be good to go. One more thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a target. And that way it will open up into a new tab. So let's see what that looks like. Okay, so this is fake data, so not all of these will be real zip codes, or at least non-US. And let's just click on one and see what happens. Oh look, somewhere in Ohio. How nice. So one more thing. Let's go ahead and just give it a color. Give it the secondary color. So that is going to pull from the default theme, which I haven't done anything to add the default theme. It's just there by default, available for you to use. And so the secondary color is apparently the shade of purple. And I think we'll leave it at that. So now let's add our button here. So partly I'm just trying to compare and contrast what these look like, the link versus the button. And they're really quite similar. This time, let's take our URL here from Google, Google Maps, and I'm going to set it up a little bit nicer this time. Instead of pasting my link, I'll do that. So the Faker.js data is actually giving us useful valid states. So I'm not worried that it's going to take us to nowhere when we Google it. So there we go. All right, so I haven't changed the color yet, and I haven't changed the variant or anything, but let's just test that. Oop, that is good, except I need to add my target on there. North Carolina. Beautiful state. Target equals blank. Let's add the color here. And one more thing I'm going to do. So see how those look. It looks almost exactly like the link. The link has the underline right now. I'm going to add a variant. And I think outlined is 1, if I remember correctly. There we go. So the variants for buttons when they have... I'm trying to remember if when they have an href value that affects the button, it's more like a link button then. And I think if it has href, then a variant I usually like is called filled. But if the href value exists, then I don't think that filled is a valid value. I guess TypeScript will let us know that. And also, yeah, we've lost our styling on there. Yep, and there goes TypeScript saying, don't do that. That is not a valid value. So anyway, or maybe I'm just remembering the variant name wrong. So anyway, we've got our outlined value on there. And one thing I want to point out is that the links also have variants, but their variants have different values. Their variants are basically like DOM elements. So I could have put in a variant equals h1. And kaboom. So that is an option. Because sometimes it's hard to tell what is really the difference between a link and a button. They really are quite similar. So with that, that's really, I think, everything I want to highlight. Actually, one thing we should do, well, 2 things we should do. First, let me see if that wants to format any better. Yes, it does. Another thing that we should do, just to have this looking nice, is you can see how these buttons are all different sizes. I'm going to just give it a quick SX prop value. See what that looks like. Much better. So you can see that as I set that to 200, I think that will fill for any state. I don't think there's a state with a name too long for that, but there's that max content value for our width for our table container, and sure enough, our table container expanded. So with that said, I hope you enjoyed this video, and please consider subscribing. And like I mentioned, I have a ton of content around the MUI table component. So please check out the video details, and I think pretty much anything you want to be able to do to a table, I've probably already done. Thanks for watching.